Five, four, three, two, one. Fragments of silicon, guaranteed to be more than 6 minutes.
I gotta say that's a very specific joke that's probably going to be lost in context if not explained.
Yeah, well, I
But
got up early for this, so.
I know. We were all expecting more from the Pokemon Direct than what we got, but we can talk about that on the stream after the interview.
Well, I can't hang around for too long, but yeah.
Like I said, well, I'm sure our reactions will take less than 6 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, welcome to another Tuesday edition of Fragments of Silicon, which means we've got another European interview to tackle. And this week we're welcoming Steve Filby of Motion Twin.
How you going, guys?
We're slightly disgruntled this morning given certain events, but otherwise doing fine.
Yeah,
How about
imagine.
you?
Not too bad. Busy with the launch and following up, making sure everything's going smoothly, working on updates, getting news out to everybody so that the community knows what's happening.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. Right. So how we start things by getting to know the person behind the game, behind the studio, behind the everything, and we begin with asking how you got interested in video games.
I don't know, probably like all kids. Way back when I was a grommet. Sorry, that's Australian for little person. Um, I used to go and hang out at my friends' places. They had, consoles back in the day. Would have been like Sega Master System and Mega Drive, or maybe like a Super NES or something. Because we didn't have any at home, and so I just sort of play games like that. And yeah, then it went from there. Eventually, I got my own computer. Um, I guess I had a bit of a pause when I went through like my university period because I was a starving university student and didn't really have a computer that was up to playing many games. And then it was when I actually moved over here to France that I picked it back up. Obviously, because it gets cold in winter, which it doesn't very much where I come from. So yeah, that's pretty much how I got into it.
And along those lines, how did you develop a professional interest in video games?
The professional interest, I guess, was more luck, good luck than good management. I was here in France. I just finished my degree, which was sort of like business marketing with a little bit of linguistics and French, obviously. Um, and one of my friends actually sent me a job offer from Motion Twin, and they were looking for a localization manager, someone to help them translate the games from French to English, who knew how to do a bit of marketing. And I was probably the opposite of that, like a marketer who knew how to do a bit of localization. So I said, hey, why not? I'll throw a resume over to these guys and see what happens. And yeah, they hired me, and so I kind of went from there.
Well, that's certainly interesting. I don't like. Well, I suppose you piqued my interest here. Uh, how does the localization work from your vantage?
Yeah, well, I mean, take Dead Cells for example. What happens is the guys will code the game, and obviously all of their coding and everything they do involves a fair amount of English. So, for example, if they're doing notes, like comments in the code or preparing patch notes or anything, that's the developers who do all of that. So there was a time when they would actually write the text in like their version of English, like developer English, I like to call it. And that was kind of hard because, you know, they'd be trying to say something that's funny in French, but translating it literally into English, and it just doesn't come out right. And so eventually we said, okay, you guys, you just write the texts in French as you want them to sound, and then I'll take them, translate them into English, and then we'll look at them together and say, hey, how do you feel about this translation? Does this sort of sum up what you're trying to say?
And how difficult a process is that?
It really depends. At the moment, for example, Dead Cells, you would have noticed, doesn't have a lot of text. That's something that we'll add later, like extra lore and extra NPCs. And it really depends on what my role is. If my role is to actually act as a writer and take the game in my hand and say, okay, well, I'm going to impose this style or this tone over the top of these characters, then it's much easier. Whereas if I actually have to translate and then culturalize, because it's not just about translation, it's about actually making it interesting to an English-speaking audience.
Yeah, idiomatic translation is a big deal.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's more complicated in that sense there.
Well, Gollix is our linguistic expert, so I'll see if he has any more questions about this particular line of questioning.
Well, I haven't been able to play the game yet. On account of I don't have that money to throw around at the moment, but it looks interesting. But you said there's not a whole lot of story or anything in yet, so there's not a whole lot that you would have had trouble translating. But do you expect there to be a lot of either humor or clever turns of phrase that you think would be hard to translate that going forward, or is it pretty straightforward?
I think it's pretty straightforward. I mean, we don't do any sort of highbrow writing in there. It's no Sunless Sea. So I mean, most of what's going to be translated will be silly little jokes or NPCs picking on the main character or whatever. So I don't think that's going to be particularly difficult. There are some members of the team, me included, who would be pushing for more of a fast and light approach to lore.
Crap. Your connection's going a little bit funky, Steve.
Yeah. Hey, can you guys still hear me?
Yeah.
Now we can. And inevitably, that's what happens whenever Skype goes weird and people start roboting. The first clear thing is, can you hear me?
Hey, sorry about that, guys. No. I just had we've been having a little bit of internet issues over here, so sometimes that happens. No. So, where did you hear me from?
I think we got most of it, but it was getting garbled a little.
Yeah, it's like midway through the sentence, you were describing how labyrinthian it was. The process can be at times, I think.
I think it depends on it really depends on how I approach the task. I mean, as I was saying, I think there are some members of the team, myself included, who would like to see more lore in the game, who would like to see a little bit more of a story and more of a universe created, but then delivered in a different kind of way than you would have in, say, a Dark Souls or something like that. But we'll see which direction we go with that. We haven't really sort of locked anything down yet.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, we'll get into that in a bit. But how long have you been working for Motion Twin?
Right now, that's gonna be 3 years. Yeah, just coming up on 3 years now.
Now, and has that all been work on Dead Cells, or did you do work on other projects as well?
We worked on other projects. So I don't know what you know about Motion Twin, but the company itself, it's actually a workers cooperative, so it's not a company as such. I mean, it is, but there's no CEO and there's no hierarchical structure. So we're all sort of equal participants in the company, and it's been going since 2001. So the guys started out making browser games, like free-to-play browser games, way back at the beginning of the modern web. So that yeah, that kept them going for a long time, and then as web sort of died out because of mobile, they said, oh well, let's try out mobile, and that's where I came in, and so I worked on a lot of mobile titles with them, and then as we were discovering how the mobile ecosystem works and what you have to do to be a successful developer on mobile, we realized pretty quickly that it wasn't really our thing, and so we said, hey, let's make a game for us, something that we'd really like to play. And yeah, so we started making like a sort of more hardcore PC console type game, and said to hell with it, and we'll see how we go.
I was wondering about that because I have done some research into the history and all that, and like everything I've seen before Dead Cells is very different. It's mobile stuff like Teacher Story, Arcado, Moosh, Kato, and so on and so forth.
Yep.
Yeah. Not necessarily anything wrong with that, but they are it's a completely different set than Dead Cells here.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's not what you would call like serious games or real games, you know what I mean? So I mean, that's always I guess part of the thing of developing those type of browser-based games is that you're not a real, and I'm wiggling my fingers here, you're not a real game developer until you actually put something on PC or console. But yeah, that was just historical in terms of how it worked out for us. These guys, it was 4 guys, making games in their apartment and selling them to other websites. Like say for example, Congregate, we'd make little games to put on that kind of site, even though we didn't. It was actually a French version of that. And so we just kept going with what we knew how to do, and didn't really take any risks in that regards for a while. And then yeah, eventually it wasn't what we wanted to keep doing, so we changed, and it's worked out quite well for us so far.
All right, so before we continue onwards, we have a trailer for Dead Cells. I believe it's the early access trailer. So Petty Fan, if you want to cue that up.
Yeah, give me one moment. All right, I'm ready.
All right, then proceed. So, for those who might be listening to the audio version of this, Dead Cells, to simply be put, it's a Roguevania. That is to say, it's a Metroid Castlevania type game that has, well, the familiar rogue elements attached to it. And I suppose the first question is, where did the idea to combine Metroidvania and Rogue come from?
Well, that's kind of a long story. So I'll try and be as brief as I can. But one of our browser-based games that we made is called Daytona. The French version is called Hordes. And it's a game where you and 39 people have to work together in a real time online in this little town, sort of undertaking a limited number of actions per day in order to collect stuff to defend your town against a zombie attack. And so Dead Cells initially was designed to be sort of like the spiritual survivor to this game. And so when we first started, like for example, when I first touched the project back in the end of 2014, would have been June, July 2014. The game was supposed to be like an online multiplayer competition sort of tower defense game. And we were iterating on this game design and really iterating on this game design, and each time we sort of cut things out of it and rebooted it, it got more and more like a platformer and less like what it started out as. So, for example, at one stage we built a prototype of a solo version of the tower defense game where you could control your character and move him around so that we could use it as a demo. And we quickly realized that that was actually quite fun. So maybe we'll just scrub the solo version now and continue the multi version and continue with the solo version. And then as we were experimenting with the character who was initially a movable turret, we thought, hey, what if we could actually do melee damage with this character? And so we allowed the character to move around, placing traps while the zombies attacked and actually dealing physical damage. And then, as we had different people come in and work on the project, they'd say, hey, what's really fun about this game? Moving around and fighting zombies, or this aspect and this aspect. And so we just kept cutting and kept iterating and kept changing until we arrived at a point where we finally said, all right, the tower defense is gone, the multiplayer online cooperation is gone, and we're left with this thing, which is essentially an action platformer that's set in this medieval universe that came out of our original sort of idea. And so we said, well, essentially we're starting again. We like what we've got here, but it's got nothing to do with what we started out with. We like the game, we like the name and the universe, but the mechanics had nothing to do with anything that we'd done before. So we said, all right, reboot. And that was at the end of 2015, December 2015. So we started working on it basically January 2016 on this of it. And then from there on, it was an iterative process, moving from this game that still had some sort of elements of the tower defense in it towards something else. And I guess the roguelike aspect came out of that tower defense thing. In a tower defense, if you lose a section, you go back to the beginning of that section. And so we sort of kept that idea. And then it became just a question of building something that we like. Like I'm a big fan of Rogue Legacy. So myself and a few other guys were sort of saying, hey, well, it would be cool if we could have this kind of like, Castlevania exploration type thing going on, but with that roguelite running over the top of it. And other guys who are more fans of, say, Binding of Isaac, well, they're like, well, we like the run thing, but we don't like permanent upgrades of Rogue Legacy. And so then we took these sort of two competing ideas that we had in the group and said, hey, well, here's a crazy idea. What if we can make them work together? And then the rest is history, I guess.
Yeah, I was gonna say that the concept for the game at least reminded me a bit of, or the concept for the play style reminded me a bit of Rogue Legacy.
I'm really coming to understand how influential Rogue Legacy is, considering so many modern day roguelikes are taking inspiration from it.
Yeah, I think Rogue Legacy is sort of potentially underrated. I mean, if you look at it just on PC, it sold like 1.5 million copies or something outrageous like that just through Steam. And even though, for example, the combat is very simple and it's not everybody's cup of tea. For example, some of the guys here hate the acceleration in the game because when you're moving a character around, you can go from 0 to 100 quite quickly. So it has a very particular play style. But if you do enjoy that core loop, then it's a compelling game. I mean, I've spent way too much time playing it. So
yeah, and again, certainly this game has many differences from that, but just the general idea of the procedurally generated sort of Metroidvania environment.
Yeah, well, we wanted to take it a step further. I mean, we were heavily influenced by Rogue Legacy, but at the same time, we also took Rogue Legacy and sort of thought about what not to do. So one of the things that I found frustrating with Rogue Legacy sometimes was the procedural generation was quite random in the sense that you could end up with a room in front of you that was just all spikes on your very first run. And so if you're not particularly up there with your reflexes, you might just have to suicide into the spikes and start again. So when we were thinking about how we were going to do our procedural generation, we definitely sort of were informed by these experiences that we've had. We're like, okay, well, we can't have any runs where you just have to suicide because the piece of building in front of you is terrible. And we wanted to take it further as well, because the Metroidvania aspects in Rogue Legacy are quite simple in the sense that the world is fixed. You know, you got the tower at the top, the forest on the right, the dungeon or the ground bit below.
And there aren't that many like abilities that you gain to increase your traversal ability.
Yeah, exactly. You can access all of those areas right from the beginning. Actually, you don't need any of the sort of the skills, like or potentially double jump to get into one of them. But it was more. I think people were like, oh wow, it's something that happens in a castle, and you can unlock, you know, sort of better stuff that will allow you to do better in the game. And so that was where the whole sort of Roguevania or Metroidvania influence came from with those guys.
So here's a question: have you ever heard of a game called Abyss Odyssey?
I haven't actually. What's it called again?
Abyss Odyssey.
Abyss Odyssey.
Yes.
Not like AB.
Yeah,
Abyss Odyssey.
I bring this up because this is actually a procedurally generated Metroidvania title.
Okay.
Now, I'm just wondering if you've ever heard of it, or if it's ever been mentioned to you, because I have played that before, and there's a lot of similar ideas in that game, but rest assured, it's very different than Dead Cells.
Yeah, no, not personally. I mean, I'll ask around with the team to see if anyone has played it or heard of it. Abyss, as in like ABIS or AB
ABYSS, I believe.
As in like a grand chasm kind of deal, Abyss.
Okay, Abyss.
Yeah. Oh well, but anyway, so how are the graphics done here? Because I got to say, it's all pretty stunning stuff.
Yeah, there's not really a lot that's special in it. Nothing that hasn't been done before. It's just that when we started out, we knew that we were making a 2D pixel art roguelike game, and so we said, "Wow, if we're going to do this, we're taking on sort of a niche that is very well established. So we have to have a very, very strong visual identity for the game. I mean, you have to look at it and say, wow, it's pretty." And so basically what we were aiming for is like this neo retro look, in the sense that it's pixel art, but it's got a 3D lighting system, dynamic particle system. All of the characters are actually rendered in 3D. You've got full shader use over the top of everything, so it's actually quite a modern game in how it's put together. So, I mean, there are no real tricks to it. All of the backgrounds and everything are drawn by hand by Gwen, our decor artist. He does it in Photoshop. The only trick that he uses is he does it twice. He paints all of the items, and then he will paint normal maps over the top of them. And so then the normal maps are integrated into the game, and as we have a 3D light source that moves past these items, the light is actually rendered correctly by the 3D engine onto those items. So that's sort of what gives it that sense of depth and that sense of being alive, as opposed to the cartoonish look that you would normally get with pixel art. Then the next trick, and probably the one that impresses people the most, is the characters. So the hero and most of the monsters are all actually 3D models. And so we did this like mostly out of practical reasons. I mean, we would have loved to do it all by hand, But at the end of the day, when you're going to have the number of animations that we do in the game and the attention to detail that we pay to the feeling of the game, so the weight of weapons, and like how everything sort of looks and feels in terms of the combat, you need to be able to do retakes really quickly. So, for example, if a developer says, "Oh, this sword feels a little bit light," what I want to do is add a slowdown after this frame. So freeze the game and then add a couple of milliseconds slowdown to give it that feeling of weight. Then that would require, in a hand-drawn situation, that the artist goes, "Ah, well, now I have to throw everything out and start again." Whereas with a 3D situation, he can just take his model, tweak the animation, and then re-export it into our little program that creates the pixel look, and away we go. So it's a retake goes from taking half a day to half an hour to an hour. So that's how we do that.
Right. So, how many people are working on Dead Cells right now?
That depends on how you count the team. The technical part of the team is 4 developers and 2 artists. Then we've got a freelance guy who does the music. You've got myself who does like the production and so like my role is kind of like producer here, but then my main function is business, marketing, like everything that the guys don't have time to do for themselves. And then I've got another guy who helps me out with that. So all up, there's 9 of us in the office on any given day, but 6 core members of the team.
Makes sense. I like it, and I'm guessing you're all local.
Yeah, we're all based in Bordeaux in France, so we all come to work at. Well, we try to get here at 9 in the morning, and then we try to get out of here by 6. But generally works out that we get here at like 10 or 11 and leave at like 8 or 9. So
All right. So shifting a bit, who's handling the music? Because I gotta say, some of the music I wasn't expecting. Like the beginning area has a lot of Spanish guitar.
Yeah, I think again that sort of goes back to the fact that the game started out as something else. When we first started, we really paid a lot of attention to the medieval setting, and so one of our good friends, Johan, is the guy who does the music, and he said, "All right, medieval Spanish guitar. I mean, it's like it has to be done to give you sort of like that lutine feeling to the music." And so he started putting together this really acoustic feeling stuff, trying to do something a bit different, sort of to separate us from, that chiptune or the pixel, that retro music that you would normally get in a pixel art game like that, or dubstep at the end of the day. And we liked it. We thought, yeah, this actually sort of goes with this identity that we want to give to the game as being neo-retro, like giving a nod to all of the things that have been done, but bringing that little sort of new touch that we can bring to the game. So, yeah.
Well, I gotta admit, I like this approach because there's nothing wrong with the retro aesthetic and all that. But if you're not really invoking the past, I find the art when people do that, it's a bit disconnected. To explain, like, if you're going, like, if everything looks 8-bit but it doesn't look like a Nintendo game, then I find it kind of hokey. Something like this is much more preferable because not just from an identity perspective, but it makes it stand out.
Yeah, well, I think that's been a problem that has plagued like the indie scene for a while in some ways. You so often get on social media or on Steam or whatever people who are just like, "Nah, pixel art, don't like it," and as soon as they see the pixel art aesthetic, they just don't want to hear anything about it. And that's obviously a particular group of people who are interested in CS:GO or whatever. I don't know what those people play, but what is interesting to me is to see how that aesthetic can really turn people off. And so I think you have to be careful when you're going to do a pixel art game. You have to take that into account. There are people who don't like it because it doesn't bring anything new, or like you say, it looks a little bit hokey. And so we we really tried to avoid that by saying, okay, well, we're going to do pixel art, but we're going to do it our way, and we're going to make sure that once we're done, we've hopefully brought something new to the genre rather than just doing exactly what's been done before.
Right. Right. So moving over to Dark Souls. I mean, I've seen in the press materials that it's touted that there is Souls-like combat. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So I guess one of the hardest parts about selling another 2D pixel art side scroller action platformer Souls-like game is that it's another one of those games in amongst a million others that are going to come out. And so what you have to do is try and communicate the unique selling points of a game in as few words as you can. And unfortunately, that can often lead to the buzzword situation. So when we were sitting around and we were talking about, say for example, how to tell people that it's a roguelike Castlevania game, one of the developers was having a joke and he said, "Oh, we'll call it Roguevania." And there was sort of that moment where we all looked at each other and were like, this could be interesting. And it was in some ways similar to that with what happened with the combat system. Because we spent months. We spent 3-4 months, I think, iterating over the combat system to give it that fluid feeling, and to make sure that each weapon has a different impact on the gameplay. And so that's how we came up with sort of this like Souls light combat idea. Is we were really trying to say is that the combat feels really good. Each weapon will heavily influence the way that you play with you play with the monsters, and the monsters have patterns that will punish you if you don't learn them. So we're completely aware of the fact that at the end of the day, like Souls like any reference to the Souls games are kind of a bit of a stretch. However, for us, saying something like Souls like combat was just an easy way to say that, hey, the combat in this game is good, check it out. So that's really where that came from.
Well, if it's not combat, Dark Souls is usually used as shorthand for difficulty. Of course. Of course. Yeah. Sort of another shorthand for difficulty is, roguelike. Because one of the key features is punishing difficulty.
Exactly. I mean, I guess it depends on how you look at it. I mean, we actually peeved. I think I don't want to show off too much, but I think we can claim this. We actually annoyed one of the writers at Rock Paper Shotgun, and he wrote an article saying, I've seen all these games coming out with this Souls-like business, but what is actually a Souls-like game? And he was saying, it's all about the level design. And we 100% completely agree with him in that. So I think using Souls-like as shorthand for difficult can be misleading, because there are a lot of things that make a Souls game a Souls game, and it's the combination of all of those things that make it that game. If you take just punishing difficulty, like you say, that could also just be a roguelite. I mean, Risk of Rain is punishingly difficult. But it's not Souls-like in any way, shape, or form. So, yeah, I don't like generalizing like that, but at the same time, it's much easier to say, Souls-like combat than it is to say, well, it's actually a really fluid combat system where each weapon impacts your gameplay, and, and then you've got to go in and explain all of that. It just gets it out of the way in 3 words. So,
yeah, my impression of the combat in the Souls series is that it's pretty heavily dodging and countering based.
Yep.
As someone who has actually played the game, it is you're going to need to learn how to properly use the dodge roll if you're going to get anywhere here.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously the other reference, that we have with the combat for us is that, Dark Souls is slower, but you're going to be dodging, you're going to be rolling, you're going to be parrying, and Dead Cells is a lot faster, but if you don't know how to dodge and to take advantage of your iframes during the roll, then you're going to have trouble.
Right, and so delving into the weapon system a bit more, what kind of weapons do you have, and how do they change the rhythm of combat?
Okay, so I think we're up to about 50 weapons now at last count. And basically, we're still iterating over the design of each and every weapon. But what we really want to do is give people a feeling of variety and a feeling of choice in their runs. So obviously, the drop of the weapons is controlled by which weapons you've unlocked, and then just RNG. So we're going to put level 1 weapons in the first level, and you'll be able to drop any level 1 weapon. So you might come across big, heavy broadswords. You might come across bows, whips, maces, daggers. If you can think about it, and we've managed to come up with interesting gameplay, we will have put it in there. But basically, we want to give people that option to play around with builds, to see how things work together, and to come up with something that they like. And all of that is based around the gameplay and the feeling of each weapon. So, for example, if you take a firebrand, you can then throw these things that are going to light up the ground wherever they land. Now, it doesn't do a lot of damage by itself, but if you then combine that, say, with an oiled sword, which is going to actually coat all of your victims when you hit them in oil, then all of a sudden you can have a synergy that's going to be really explosive. So it depends on what you want to do. Do you want to hang back and try and cheese your enemies, or running mostly with a bow or throwing knives and like distance-based skills? Or do you want to get in there, take heaps of damage, get it back, and deal heaps of damage with melee attacks? So that's really the overall idea that we have behind the weapon situation.
Right. Although there's another layer there with explodables, like the trigger weapons, grenades, and flashbangs and the like.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. I found the ice grenades to be eminently useful so far.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, that depends on your style. I mean, I see a lot of people who are going to deal with flying enemies with the ice grenade, for example. You'll come across in the tower, there's some flying mobs that will really come after you in great numbers if you're not careful about how you aggro them. If you've got that freeze grenade, then you can use that as like a bit of a panic button. You throw the freeze grenade, and then you go and take him out hand to hand. But then you might have other players who are going to prefer to run with, say, a damage buff in their skills instead of a grenade, or ground-based weapons for dealing with more dangerous hand-to-hand guys, and then they'll just stand back with an electric whip or with the throwing knives and deal with the flying enemies that way. So yeah, again, like the weapons and the skills, they're all designed just to give people different ways to run through the game and have fun.
I can definitely see that. I found several weapons so far, and some of them I really like throwing knives, and some of them I utterly hate, like shields. I think that's just because I haven't figured out how to use shields properly yet.
Yeah, we had a lot of feedback about the shields. So I don't know if you've updated to the beta branch that we launched last week. But we changed the shields a little bit so that they actually feel a lot more interesting to use. I mean, they're still parry-based, so it's all about timing. But now if you get hit, they'll add a little sort of force field around you to give you some extra iframes, so there are advantages and reasons for using them. But again, that is exactly what we wanted to do. One of the cool things about Dark Souls is that you can build your character up any way you want. If you want to play a caster and run with light armor but powerful spells and stay away from things, then you can do that. But if you want to build a tank and get in there and hack away with like a Black Knight's halberd or something, you can do that. And we wanted to give people that sort of idea with Dead Cells as well. So if you want to play slowly and methodically, going in, blocking, block, hit, and dealing and kiting one monster at a time sort of towards you, then that's fine. Whereas if you just want to charge through, do as much damage, and stack bleed damage with throwing knives, then that's great. Personally, I like throwing knives because they auto target flying enemies, so they're kind of great from my perspective.
Yeah, I do like how there's an allowance for many different play styles. But on the matter of the dead cells themselves, what exactly are they? If that can be explained at this point, or if that's some sort of storyline.
Yeah, that's kind of part of the lore. So we're not really answering questions about that at the moment because we haven't actually finished working on the lore. So there are some things that we're sort of leaving blurry in order to give us the ability to change things until we're 100% sure of it. But it's also got to do with your character. So obviously you play as this sort of weird green blob creature who comes out of God knows where. And that's part of the story. So you've got to figure out what this creature is, and who he is, and what he's doing, and why he's running around taking over dead bodies and collecting cells. Not to mention this shady character who seems to want the shells, the cells in between each level.
Right. So I think it should be communicated to the audience if they're not aware yet that Dead Cells is actually available like right now because it's an early access title. And my question in regards to that is, how much is there right now when if someone were to purchase this game, at this moment in time?
Well, that depends on which developer you ask on which day, but there is no more than 50% of the game. So what we're going to do is double the current content in terms of levels, monsters, weapons, just content. But then that's sort of the minimum that we want to do. We'd love to see many more bosses. I mean, at the moment you've got 2 bosses in the game. I hope I'm not spoiling anyone there. And we sort of promised to do 4, but that's the absolute minimum. And I mean, I know that there'll be a riot in the office if we don't do more than 4. So it's you've got a lot of stuff coming before we get to the final product.
So the play mechanics are mostly solidified, but there's still a lot of specific content to be added.
Exactly. So that was our big thing. I mean, a lot of people have been burnt with early access, us included. And so what we really wanted to do was put down like the base of the game and say, look, this is the core experience, and that won't change dramatically. The combat's always going to feel really satisfying. You're always going to be exploring through procedurally generated little areas and coming across different types of enemies that are going to be very punishing. And so we really polished that to give the space game that feeling that it has. But we said to ourselves, well, we don't know how much content we're going to be able to produce and where we might be able to take it. So we said, we'll do it in early access. We'll see what people think. That way, if we've gone down the wrong path, we'll have the time to change it. Or we'll have the time to keep adding on until we're satisfied that we can say, hey, this is the game. This is how much we want to charge for it. And we're proud to put that there for you.
And in regards to the price, is it always going to be like $17 here, or is that going to like increase as things get added, as things get polished up until like the release?
Yeah, we will most likely increase the price. We set what some people would consider to be probably a high price for early access. I mean, early access, your price is generally going to be sort of more like 10, 12. And we did that because we really wanted to focus on getting a specific type of player. We want the hardcore roguelite players. We want the hardcore Metroidvania players. We want the cream of the crop in terms of people who are going to get involved on the forums, who are going to come to us with ideas, and who are going to say, look, this game, it was yours, now it's kind of ours too, so let's work together and let's build something. So we think that probably, given the content that we'll have in the game, we will have something that will be worth more, but that's going to be something that we'll do collaboratively with the community. We haven't had, I don't think, even a single person who's been really upset with the price. Had some people who've said, oh, it's a bit steep, but then they've actually played it and said, yeah, actually, that's worth it. That's easily worth it. So yeah, most likely it will increase, but we'll see that with the community, and we'll obviously base that on how many hours of gameplay you're going to get out of it, how much fun you can have with the game, and what we actually feel that we can ask people to pay for our little game here.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And along those lines, how long do you think the early access period is going to last here?
Yeah, so early access is going to be minimum 8 months, up to 12, and potentially more. But we're hoping to get everything done in sort of 8 to 12 months. Ideally, what we would like to do is get in contact with the guys from consoles and do a sim ship release with console and a 1.0 PC version for all platforms at the same sort of time that we launched the game. So, April, May 2018. Whether or not we will actually be able to do that, that's another story. But at the moment, we're going along quite nicely. So 8 to 12 months to finish the content of the game should be a realistic estimation. If you want to add the console consideration and other platforms into that, then it could take a little longer, but we'll see how we go.
That's actually
and what
pretty
consoles
solid.
are you looking at?
Yeah, I knew that was going to be the next question. We can't. We're not at the point where we can start saying, "Oh, we're definitely going to do this," or "We're definitely going to do that." But we're in discussions with all three of the big ones. So Switch, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One. But we're still, at the stage of, hey, where are these guys? And we made this game, and you guys do this. How about we work together and see what can happen? And so far, we've had a pretty enthusiastic reaction. So we're confident that we're going to be able to work with these guys and make something cool.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. All things considered, like I'll admit I was really surprised at how polished this game is already. Now, not for nothing, but early access games kind of have a stereotype to them, not unwarranted. Because these are things that are in development, but like when people usually talk early access games, they're talking about things that are not that far along. And I suppose the question here is, were you ever concerned about the early access label, you know, affecting things?
Oh yes, we were. Um, early access was kind of my baby because I'm a big fan of clay games. I've spent way too much of my life playing Don't Starve Together and Don't Starve, the base game, and so I sort of followed along with those guys on their journey through early access, and I really liked what they did. I really enjoyed how they did it, the way they communicated with the community, the way they built a community around a game that, at the very beginning was quite basic. Um, and and so I said, like these guys can do it. Why can't we do it? And so obviously when you bring that opinion into a room full of developers and you say, hey, we're going to do early access, you instantly get boos and rotten tomatoes being thrown, and it's a risky opinion to have. Um, but I said, look, guys, early access has a bad reputation, yes, but there are counterpoints to that. So take Clay, for example. Take the guys from Red Hook. Take the guys from Vlambeer. Like, you got Nuclear Throne. You got all kinds of developers of sort of this class of professional independent developers who are saying, we want to make a game. We've got this super crazy ambitious idea, and we're going to need lots of help, lots of community input, lots of time to balance it. But we're going to do it right. And I said, well, why can't we do the same thing? And so eventually I got the guys on board. And as we all started sort of exploring early access more, we realized that, hey, there is actually a place for developers who are willing to continuously update a game and who are willing to bring a core idea that is polished. And so I think we might have, in hindsight, gone too far in terms of the polish that we put on the game. because the reaction that we've got has just been phenomenal. I mean, everyone comes and says, like, I cannot believe that this is an early access game like this. You put this out full stop right now, and I'd buy it. It's like a complete game. So, yeah, we were probably overly cautious when it came to that because of that stigma of early access. So we didn't leave anything to chance. We really, really spent time going over and over and over everything. We did a whole bunch of internal testing. And we do still do a lot of internal testing. You know, we take like Friday afternoon where we all just stop working and play the game for a couple of hours. We give it out to friends, and then as we were moving closer to launch, we did a closed beta with a couple of hundred people in it. Then we moved on to giving the game out to smaller streamers so that we could actually come in and spy on their play sessions and say, hey, look, this guy had this bug, or this guy didn't get this, or this guy didn't get that. So that the day that we actually launched into early access, we were pretty confident that we had something that was going to be a crowd pleaser.
Well, I suppose it's a good problem to have, so to speak. You know, going too far instead of doing too little, and you know, getting the usual early access kind of reception. I mean, and you know, we're not immune to this either. Like, our stated policy is we do not review early access games until they're, you know, no longer early access games, because not just quality issues. There is the chance that games may never leave early access,
or just that they may change so much that the review would be completely inaccurate.
Right. It's like, you know, we'll certainly like do an interview about early access games, but you know, we have no plans on reviewing Dead Cells until, well, it is 1.0.
Yeah,
that said, it sounds like we're looking forward to reviewing it when it is.
Yeah, that was something that we were very cautious about as well, when we were sort of sitting down and talking about PR and how to present the game to press and to talk about it. And so we always were very clear about, you know, if you want to do a review, then we prefer that you call that a preview, because while we're pretty confident we've got the core of the game pinned down here, it's still early access. There are a lot of people out there who have been burnt by that. There are a lot of people who have policies of not reviewing early access games, and so we understand that. So if you want to do a preview, that's cool. It's a full review for a 1.0 game for me seems like a completely logical thing to do. So yeah.
Well, if we were to do a preview on that kind of be up to Petty Fan. He's the guy who actually works the stream. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
You know, so you know, unless they give us another code, you'd have to buy the game on your own. So.
Yeah, and that's not happening at the moment.
Well, it's not like you need to purchase it now or anything.
And I'm gonna try to get it when I have a little bit of extra.
Yeah, I'm like, you know, that being said, this is a really good work in progress. We are getting short on time here, so I'm going to see if my colleagues have any final questions.
I'm good.
Yeah, I haven't played it yet, so I don't have that many more specific questions, but it sounds interesting, and I'm looking forward to trying it out when I can.
I suppose my final question is this game using a development engine like Unity or UE4, or is it a custom job?
Yeah, it's a custom job. It's all developed in the HAX programming language, and we use a library called Heaps that we work on. We actually share office space with the guys from Shiro Games, and so the head of Shiro Games was also one of the founders of Motion Twin, and he created this programming language. So we build a lot of our tools together. It's all open source. It's all up on GitHub if you wanna check it out.
That is interesting. All right. So the game is Dead Cells. It's currently in early access. I'm going for $17 right now. You know, not exactly sure how much the price is going to increase in the future. I'm pretty sure that's something that's going to be talked about while the game is in development. But yeah, I will. even though the game is not ready in terms of release yet, what is there is pretty polished, and I would recommend picking it up, given everything that seems to be in working order. So, Steve, thank you for taking time out of your schedule and joining us today.
No worries. Thanks very much for having me, guys. It's been fun.
No problem. No problem. I mean, maybe we'll have you on the program again when the game is actually out in the wild and ready to be reviewed.
Definitely. Get you guys over some keys, and we can do this again. I'll get one of the developers to come in and throw a French accent at you.
Wouldn't be the first time. Like, we've dealt with French developers before, so.
Cool.
Anyway, so that'll about do it for this installment of Fragments of Silicon. Be sure to join us tomorrow for our main show, as we're going to be having Richard Nava of Happy Badger Games. We're going to be talking about their latest, a roguelike racing game called Smugglecraft. Like, I tell you, roguelikes are just going in all sorts of directions these days. Like, anyway, and Petty Fan, do you want to tell the audience what's happening on MSP tomorrow?
Tomorrow night we have Richard Epcar.
Yeah. Well, way to undersell it there. Yeah. I guess I think we talked about this on Sunday.
Yeah.
But
he does a lot of voice acting.
Yes.
He's got a ton of credits to his name. You've probably heard him in something.
You may not know his name, but you know his voice.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that tomorrow. Until such time, I wish you all good gaming.